It's right there in the Word for your mind, your body, and your soul. It's right there in the Word. The Word of God will set you free. It's right there in the Word. Eternalizing is the key. It's right there in the Word. It's right there in the Word. It's right there in the Word. It's right there in the Word.
Good afternoon, and welcome to another installment of There's a Word for That, the weekly word presentation as part of the Hymns by Phil Carter Fellowship. Today's word is faith. I am a pseudo gardener. I love growing things, watching them blossom, watching them beautify their space and become everything that they were meant to be. I know it's strange, but I secretly measure how well life is going for me by how well my gardening is doing. I know there's no scientific proof of that, but I can tell you that years ago when I was going through one of the most roughest times in my life, when my marriage was falling apart and the separation that happened in my life, the funny thing about it was that there was a tree in my front yard that half of it split away at the time of the separation. Well, as time went on, when the separation led to a final divorce, the other half of the tree came down a year or so later. Now, I know there were storms that were attached to both of those events. There was a derecho the first time, and then one of the hurricanes, I can't remember which one it was, that took down the rest of the tree. But still, you have to admit that the timing of both of those events, the first one and then the final split, was really quite eerie. It mimicked what was happening in my life. But all of that aside, one thing I have learned through the years about gardening is the difference that the right conditions can make. The right soil, the right light, the right temperature, the right fertilizer, the right watering, all of those things, when they are working together, can make the best and the fullest flowers, the brightest blooms, and the longest lasting growth. But when one of those conditions is off, the soil is bad, when there's not enough water or enough sun, it really will show through in the plants. I've even experimented once with 2 potted plants of the same plant. One I used Miracle Grow, and the other I just let it grow on its own. And sure enough, the plant that received the extra did far better than the plant that did not. Faith is like that too. What you water and feed and fertilize grows. If you feed your faith with the Word of God, nurture it with prayer, seed it with meditations, and water it with regular feedings of hymns and spiritual songs, your faith will respond with hearty growth, and it will sustain you through tough times. Regardless of the conditions, it'll rise up and stand strong because it has been strengthened, so that even when we feel weakened by the trials of life, we will be able to declare that God's strength is made perfect in our weakness because we have tended our faith. On the other hand, if you feed yourself with worries, those too will grow. Busy yourself with distractions, neglect, and ignore the tending of your soul, then when tough times come, your faith will falter under the harsh conditions. It'll wither up and fail to produce any blossoms or healthy growth. And that which you fail to nurture, that which you fail to water and give light to, will become frail and wither away, never fully reaching its potential. And worse still, without proper tending, sometimes it will even die. Developing faith, though, is not for the faint of heart. It takes great faith to believe that something beautiful can grow when all you see in front of you is dirt. In fact, someone once said, "There's no better display of faith than a farmer planting seeds in a field and working the soil to grow a crop." I saw that just earlier this year. Early in the season, I think it was around March or something, I bought this planter from Home Depot. It basically was a big pot full of dirt, and it said that on the outside it was promising to grow these beautiful flowers. The flowers looked so pretty. I bought the pot home and followed the instructions. It came filled with the dirt and the pictures, and it said that you had to wait for the weather to turn solidly so that there would be no more chance of frost. And when that happened, then you could start watering. Sure enough, I watched and I waited. I listened to the weather reports and everything. And then when the weather finally turned and there were no more threats of cold spells, that's when the conditions seemed right and I started watering that pot. I put some water in the pot and I waited. And then I watered and then I waited. And then I watered and I waited. I moved it from place to place to ensure that it was getting the best lighting that it needed. I read the instructions over again, and but after a while, nothing really happened. Nothing at all grew. After a few weeks, still nothing grew. Started complaining to my husband, look at this. I bought this mess. I don't even know where the receipt is. I'm ready to take it back. It's not growing anything. And just as I was convinced that I had gotten ripped off real good, I began to see these tiny little leaves poking up through the soil. Tiny little green leaves coming out of the soil that I thought was producing nothing. And as the days passed, more and more, until that pot today is running over with lush green leaves, and it's got these beautiful, bright, white, fluffy blooms that I've never even seen before. That's how faith grows best. It takes into account the barrenest of situations, and it says, go ahead and plant something and trust that it will grow. But once you plant, you have to water and wait and water and wait and give it the best conditions that you can, sometimes fertilizing, sometimes making sure the light is right, but all the while trusting that even though you can't see anything happening, that something is happening deep below. Something is growing and stirring underneath. Something is calling that which is deep below up to poke its head up through the soil and to come and produce what God intended for it to be. And one day, emerging from that soil, faith is believing that something good is on the way, even when you don't see anything happening. It's believing that something beautiful will come up and something amazing is about to happen, even in the bleakest, darkest of situations. One of these days, I want to try planting what's called a night garden, because there are so many dark seasons in life that one thing I learned about gardening is that there are some flowers that will only bloom in the night. I love that. I love the idea that the moon can draw some blooms to open up that will not open up in the daytime. And don't we need that in the night times of our lives? Don't we need to know that there are even possibilities of growth and beauty in dark seasons? James 5:7 says, be patient then, my brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and the spring rains. We can apply this agricultural lesson to our lives in so many ways. Children who grow up in bad conditions with little affirmation and love, who struggle and can't seem to find a footing, but when removed from those conditions and given the right conditions, given a positive environment and nurturing attention, they will oftentimes turn around and begin to flourish in ways nobody even imagined. Similarly, relationships that are broken but that are tended to well can be mended when they are watered with time and care and love. The same is true in so many areas of our lives, in our homes, our health, even our careers. But to be sure, let's just be honest, farming is no easy task, and it was no easy task in Jesus's day, who used all of these farming analogies. The conditions back then were harsh. They were under Roman rule. Many people lived hand to mouth. They dealt with extreme debt and disease and strife. They had unjust laws. They were overtaxed. There was homelessness, disease, and more. And it required great faith to keep hoping in a future that they could not see. But that's exactly the reason Jesus came. That despite the circumstances, he came to provide for them a revolutionary hope that those who suffered under the weight of oppression might have life and have that life more abundantly. Somebody ought to say, thank God for Jesus. I can't close without adding this little bit here, because any gardener or farmer will tell you that not everything that grows strong requires all that much attention. Weeds will grow in any climate. Isn't it amazing how weeds manage to flourish even under the worst conditions? They'll survive the harshest storms. They'll flourish even in the driest and the shadiest places. That's why we have to take captive every thought to obey Christ, being ready to punish every disobedience, so that your obedience is made complete. In fact, if you don't get your thoughts under control, just like weeds, they will fully take over the whole garden and choke out everything else. In faith language, weeds can be worries and weeds can be regrets. They might be negative thoughts or revengeful thoughts in anything that works against the product of faith. In fact, in all of my gardening experience, the one thing that seems to survive regardless of the conditions is a weed. And they grow strong and they grow deep. My mom used to call them noxious growth, and they don't seem to require anything of the things that are necessary for healthy plants to grow. And let's not be naive. You can't just pull up a weed and think that that's the end of it. You've got to do something to go down deep and extract them. And that's how it is with these negative thoughts. Some of them are so deeply embedded in us that to weed them out will require extra work. But the good news is that the Word of God can certainly work on your behalf to do that. The good news is the good news can get rid of the weeds in our lives. And so the question arises from all of this. I'll leave you with this today, this word of faith. What are you watering in your life? What are you nurturing? What's getting all the attention and the light from you? Because that which you nurture will grow. If it's worry and regret and confusion and revenge, then those things will take root and grow. Oh, but if it's hope, and if you are applying the Word of God, and if it's promise and belief that the best is yet to be, because it always is yet to be, then that's what will grow in your garden. Jesus used these farming analogies so often as a way to explain the ways of faith in our lives. And he likens us to the soil. And he said the problem that the farmer had was not with the seed. It was always with the soil. Hard, dry, shallow soil rejects the seed. The birds come and consume it, and it never takes root. But good soil, on the other hand, soaks up the word. That's those who hear the word, who hold on to the word with an honest and a good heart and allow it to bear good fruit in their lives. Those are the ones who will produce a garden and a harvest to be proud of. Well, I need to tell you, my garden is looking pretty good this year. Life is feeling pretty good right now. There are flowers galore with blooms and blossoms for the most part, and there are fragrances and delights, and I have a little heather over here and a hydrangea over there. I've got some stuff growing that I've never even seen grow before. I even have some things that came back from last year. I've got those things, but I've also got some weeds that still need tending, more weeds than I care to count, but I'm steadily working on rooting them out, making them grow in the good soil and getting rid of that hard, fallow soil that won't produce anything good, so that I can have a stronger faith. I pray that you will do the same. I pray that you will prosper in this season. Well, this is another edition of There's a Word for That. I'm Pastor Cynthia Turner Wood, and I will see you next week for another installment. Thank you for listening.